Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Incubator Podcast. We are back this Sunday with a very special interview where we have the pleasure of having on today Latoya Southwell, who is a certified birth doula. Latoya, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Daphna is in the studio as well. Sorry, Daphna, I skipped you.
I'm
This
here.
is
Don't forget about
unusual.
me. Yeah,
How are you?
doing well, buddy. Thanks.
Latoya, thank you for being on with us. You're a certified birth doula. You're a trained lactation counselor, a certified Reiki practitioner. You're serving families across the Lower Hudson Valley, Rockland County, Connecticut, Westchester, and New York City. You are the doula assistant manager at Children's Health and Research Foundation of the CHRF of the Lower Hudson Valley Perinatal Network, and you co-host the Westchester County Baby Cafe. You'll tell us a little bit about that later. You have a background in nursing, in banking, and various other fields, but you're passionate about education and empowering families on their journey to parenthood. You're originally from Antigua and St. Thomas, and you have a culturally inclusive approach to birth that reflects your appreciation for community and support and resilience. You live in New York with your husband, 4 children, and you have a tuxedo cat. Is that correct, Vinny?
Yeah.
All right. So it's
He-
yeah, go ahead.
He's literally tuxedo. So it's black and then V-neck with
Formal,
white.
formal,
So
very
that's why-
formal.
yes, very much. And then he has his collar.
Very
So-
cool. So Latoya, I want to start from the basics for myself and for the listeners. If some of us who may not be familiar with what exactly does a doula do, and how does that differ from being like a midwife or a delivery nurse? Can you tell us a little bit what is the role that you serve?
Sure. So a doula, we are non-medical professionals. And so we don't at any point advise in a medical capacity. However, we inform, we educate, and we advocate for our clients. In the doula role, it varies per doula. So myself, when I meet women and families, if they're married or have some sort of support, whomever it is, I like to meet in a group at first to introduce myself, to build a little rapport, to kind of get a understanding of the background that the woman is have traveled through, journey through. Because unfortunately, we have so many women from many different areas of the world, and they endured many different things, from whether it's trauma from youth, whether it's trauma from relationships, whether it's birth trauma. So it's important to have that understanding of where they're coming from to know how I can best be there for them and support them. In the hospitals, we support them, we help them to labor, but be able to manage the pain. And also to shift from focusing on the pain. I like to explain to my client that birthing, the same hormones you use for orgasm, you use for labor. So shift from pain to pleasure. And also to I educate them in the setup of the room. Meaning, because inside of the hospital, you have all these lights and sounds and all this that can be very tense, for these women, or stressful. And a lot of women actually have fear of the hospital, but they don't trust themselves enough to labor at home. And so when I get them, if I do get them early, it works out better because then I can work with them. And then I can help them through whatever trauma. I share my story. And if they're willing to, receive it. And that usually helps them because I have women, some are teenager. My youngest was 14. And so when I'm dealing with a youth, and even some older women, because if their mother is not in the picture, they have a void that they need to fill. So I have to then mother them in that way. So, my personal experience, I've had voids in my life and I had to work through it myself. So I understand what they need. So it's a more deeper connection, and it makes them open and more vulnerable, because that's a state that, you know, you've given up yourself. You're giving a lot of yourself. You're showing a lot of yourself more. You feel very naked. And so because it's such a very pivotal moment in their life, I like to make it a very rewarding and a very memorable moment, which is important.
And I think that's incredible. And I have met you before. I've heard you speak, and I think what really is critical to underscore is that while you're achieving all these goals, your number one priority, kind of like an airline pilot, is safety. uh, you're always surrounding your patients in a safe environment, and that, for the most part, really involves navigating the sometimes hostile hospital environment, and making sure that um, your clients, the patients, are not in a distrustful environment, that there's an environment that they can have some control over. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, for many people going into labor, entering the hospital feels like entering a foreign place, and it doesn't feel like you're entering a very homey type of environment. No matter how much these hospitals want to call themselves birthing hospitality centers or whatever, it's
Yeah.
still a very stressful environment.
It is, because they really don't give you the time you need. So I encourage my clients to labor at home. Home is a safe space for majority of people. And that way, when you go through the labor, because, they we have different names we call it. Some people have like a safe word, because labor to them, it triggers them. It puts them into this fear. Um, but I'm a very straightforward and honest person, so I ask them. And I also work with them with their preferences, their birth plan. We also call it birth preferences, because I want to know how I can make her day the best day for her.
Mhm.
How does she see it? But also, the reason why I do that, I call it a homework. I give them 3 homework assignments. If they want to birth vaginally, I ask them for their best day, the perfect day. If you could have the perfect day, whatever you want, however it looks like, picture that for me and write that down. And then the other thing is, if you have to compromise in that situation, where would you compromise? If you say, I want it natural, no drugs, no, you want to labor freely, monitoring periodically, a HEPLOC, meaning no IV, but you will self hydrate, then all that we put in the plan. And then where you're going to compromise, if you decide, okay, the pain is intense, but I want to wait until I'm in active labor, and then I will take an epidural, then that's where I know you will compromise. Um, if it's, I don't mind being monitoring. I don't want any kind of epidural, or I don't want induction. I also explain to them that, yes, certain things are in your power, but what the end result we want is safe mommy, safe baby.
Mhm.
Because when you're in that situation, you never know what is going to happen.
Mhm.
We can all say what we want to do, or what we wish, or what we would do, until you're in the situation, you never know. So I work with them with that. Where are you willing to compromise? And then the other thing is, if you have to have a C-section, just in case, because the reason why I do that is that, thank God, that's not so far the situation I've dealt with. The reason why I have that conversation is because a lot of women do not have that conversation. And when it ends up in C-section, because in that moment, they don't remember all we spoke about, or the pain is just so much. They don't hear what I'm saying, or they don't listen, or they don't follow, and they end up in a C-section, then that increases their chances of depression because it didn't turn out how they wanted. So I like to cover all the areas just in case. And, that works out really well when I do it that way. And then of course, we piggyback and we talk and I encourage them and I touch base with them very regularly to check in to see if they're hydrating, if they're exercising, if they're eating, how they're feeling, just in some sort of motivation.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always the person you would think to quote in those instances, but the Mike Tyson quote of "Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face"
Yes.
is so like it's relevant in so many scenarios, because it's true. Once the stress goes up, it's very making decisions, processing information. We see this when we have to do neonatal consult. It's very very difficult. Um, Before I hand off to Daphna, one quick question: what is the biggest misconception about doulas that you encounter?
Ugh. Oh, my Lord. Ugh.
I thought we were going to work up to a
Mm.
question like that.
Well, I think the biggest thing that people think about is doula delivers baby. They don't understand the difference between a doula and a midwife, which is one of the things you asked about. What I like to say is a midwife is a doctor, a doula will be a nurse.
Right.
Except doulas, midwife go through the medical routes now. Doulas don't. And it comes a little complex for doulas because if you have a nursing license, birth doula is not really where you want to really vary at all. You don't want to go over there because it's very hard to separate the two, and you can get yourself in some sort of problem because you want natural, but then there's medicine, and in the
Mhm.
medical field you have to do this, and so it becomes a little complex. So if a nurse want to be a doula, I always say postpartum is the best place for you. Postpartum is the best because you get to still love on babies, and you still get to love on mommies, and you get to support them, but you don't jeopardize anything.
Hmm. By conflating the two fields, overstepping in some way.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, because it becomes very, difficult. It's that moral compass you playing with, and it's hard to sever one side to be in the other side. So
Yeah. Well, I have another, I guess, pointed question to follow up Ben's question since we're diving right in today. Our listeners are, for the most part, neonatal professionals, right? So, I guess the elephant in the room, we don't see much of what is happening on labor and delivery, admittedly, right? We come in near the end. We're popping in and out, maybe beforehand, popping in and out a little bit after. We really, other than potentially some of us, our own prenatal and delivery experiences, and that's like you talked about, so personal and individualized. We don't really know what goes on there. Okay. So we do maybe make some judgments about what's happening there. And I can imagine there are people listening who said, who have had some experiences. A baby comes in, ends up in the NICU, some sort of, birth gone not the way as anticipated, and a doula was part of that situation, right? So they may have a different perspective of doulas, and so I want to make sure that people get the most out of this interview. So I want to make sure we address that head on. Is that I recognize that some people may be coming in with some biases about the participation of doula. I think what you've highlighted so well is that the doula should, in the perfect scenario, with the right training, the doula is not planning to replace any medical advice. And what I really wanted to take away from what you said is it's almost like the doula can serve as the translator for families, right? Regardless of their spoken language, because medicine itself is kind of a complicated language. And I think what you talked about is this anticipatory guidance is like, we hope everything goes exactly like we want it to. But if it doesn't, like, how can we prepare moms for that? I totally
Yeah.
agree with you, especially our NICU parents. I mean, they're coming in with such grief about things not going the way they went. But what you can do in this prenatal time to prepare parents for things not going the way they anticipate, I think is um, remarkable. And I did want to. Ben said we're not going to get into the numbers too much, but I did want to share some data. I mean, there was a Cochrane review about doula support, um, and some of the findings, women who receive continuous, and this is just labor, not even getting into the prenatal support or postpartum support that you'll tell us about, but receive continuous labor support may be more likely to give birth spontaneously. Um, in addition, may be less likely to use pain medications or to have cesarean births, may be more likely to be satisfied and have shorter labors. Postpartum depression may be lower in women who were supported in labor. The babies of women who received continuous support may be less likely to have low 5-minute APGAR scores and well-being assessed at birth and shortly afterwards. And actually, I mean, I think the devil is in the details. There are a number of states who, through Medicaid, are really investing in doulas because they are finding that there's cost savings, mostly from reduced rates of C-sections and preterm births. So I think this is really pertinent to our field as neonatologists. And underscoring that, I recognize the literature has been quite clear that particularly Black women and minoritized women may benefit more, even more, from doula services than if we look at the whole population as a whole. And I think you spoke a little bit about culturally competent care, but I'd love for you to speak to that directly, so we can understand why this additional level of support will benefit our babies and mommies and families, I should say.
Um, well, regarding with Black and Brown, unfortunately, I work both private and in an organization. And what I found is that unfortunately, because they don't know what a doula is, they're not as receptive to receive. It They have a mindset of like it's my business. So what I find is they will accept certain care to a certain point. But then when you go into labor, the most important part of it, it's very important. Postpartum is important, but labor is important because of the disparities that we see today, right? Um, they don't call. They don't call. And a lot of it is from, unfortunately, Medicaid. Medicaid clients are the ones who receive it free, because they just think it's just information, but don't they I call it the white coat syndrome when they, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, just whatever the doctor says. And they don't trust themselves, unfortunately. They do not trust themselves. They don't trust their body. A lot of battles is, if the, the doctor will tell them, I have to in, induce you because the baby is a little too big. Um, and it'll be their second or third or fourth, but they don't look at history. So when I have a mom that is a mother second time, third time, my question is usually during your last baby, how long, um, what was the gestation of the baby, right? Were you early? Were you late? Were you right on time? All those information is important because your body have memory, right? And so you tend to repeat. Very seldom you don't. And the next child is usually much faster. Um, a lot of women tend to take someone else's story. So they want to hear the story, but then it instills fear in them. So that's another thing. They're like, oh, this friend had this baby. It was C-section. I'm overweight, or my mother had C-section. And then they they even carry that over into the breastfeeding. And I'm like, that is not your story to take. That even your previous child, not because it happened with your previous child, mean it will happen with this child. Every pregnancy is different. So in every pregnancy, you enjoy the pregnancy. You enjoy this because it's different. And so I do my best to really encourage them to trust their body. To, yes, listen to the doctor, but to understand what their rights are as well, right? And okay to ask questions. If you're not okay with something, ask questions. Don't just say yes and then you're going home and you're upset about something, or you're taking it on, because the baby also takes that on as well, and people don't consider that. Um,
Yeah,
does that
Latoya, yeah, that I think that's super interesting and very compelling. And I think that what I think this has to be framed in front of is the fact that um, African American women and other underrepresented minority are going through some appalling mortality rates when it comes to the around the time of childbirth, which I think is not making things easy for us in terms of inviting these particular communities to the hospital and say, "Hey, trust us, because things are better here." When the
yeah.
data says, "Well, it may not be," and so I think that to me the role of a doula as a catalyst for potentially making that experience a successful one is critical. And one of the aspects of that particular role that you serve in that important moment of childbirth is critical also when things, like you said in the beginning of the episode, do not go well. And so it is not uncommon for doulas to accompany their patients to the operating room and to be present for a C-section. Some people might say,
Yes.
well, this person is no longer laboring, we don't need the doula, but that's not true. And I want you to talk
No.
about, like, how does that role extend, for example, in a situation where a patient has to undergo a C-section, and then how does your role and how does your assignment, quote unquote, change as the process becomes a dramatically different one?
So I do a few things. First of all, before I go to any birth, whether i- it's very seldom I have a C-section unless it's planned, the mom opted. But before I go, I like to pray. That's big for me. And when I get there, if it's a mom that's going through a C-section, and I usually can tell. I trust myself a lot, so I take on that person's feeling. I've I've had one that was very terrified, and she did not verbalize it. I felt it, and so I asked her, and she said yes. And what she wanted me to do was to keep the calm in the room, because she said, my husband is not going to be able to handle that. I don't think he can handle that. So I need you to be the calm. And I do that. In the operating room, I have a whole conversation with them. We talk, we laugh. I tend to kind of like pay attention to kind of give her an idea where they're at. And once they know, because no one speaks to them, they're just laying there. But once they know what's going on, it kind of help to balance them. And if I could see the baby, that's even better. And I always take my phone so I could take pictures spontaneously. And then I share it with them after, and they love that I capture these moments that they didn't even expect me to do. But
Yeah,
I,
it's one of these things where in the moment people might say, no, no pictures. And then in retrospect, they're like, oh my God, thank God you took pictures.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's even birth. right?
Yeah.
They don't expect, they don't know what's happening, but all in these moments, I'm taking pictures because you cannot turn back the hand of time. You cannot see it again. You cannot get it back. And they're always happy at the end because they have these memories.
Yeah.
So, C-section is different, but I do go with my clients. I do talk to them. I laugh with them. I encourage them. I pray with them if that's what they want. Um, and just I love on them. I think that's the most important thing, is to just love on them during that time.
I love that. Um, this may sound silly. We have this concept in neonatology that is gaining traction about two-person cares for babies, and anybody can be the second person. And what it means is the nurse is doing their medical stuff, their routine stuff. But one person is there just to focus on the
The
baby and
baby.
containing the baby and calming the baby. And it sounds like it's mirrored in the work that you're doing. There's all this, everybody has their task, but the doula's task is really to focus on the mom, help explain what's going on, anticipate some of those needs. And certainly things are happening so fast sometimes. Sometimes it's not fast enough, but in the labor sphere, how that gets lost, right? Especially a lot of the deliveries we go to, they become emergent or they're way sooner than expected. And I see that those people are especially suffering as things are happening to them without them really understanding what's going on. So I appreciate you helping me make that connection. And we've talked a little bit about what you're doing in the prenatal role, of course, the significant role during delivery, but doulas also play an important postpartum role. And certainly, I've seen the data on how doula support has improved breastfeeding rates. I think that's also particularly of interest to our community in the NICU, where breast milk is so important. I was hoping you could speak a little bit to that.
Um, yeah, of course. So postpartum to me is like very important. Everything is important, but I feel like postpartum is like the toughest point in a woman's life, in a mom's life, because you have a new norm. You're trying to figure out how to, if you're married, how to make sure your husband don't feel left out, and how to love on your baby and make sure you're a great mom, and then how to self-care. And so I tend to explain to my moms to kind of like prepare for postpartum, whether it's food, snacks. Like I go to their home and I encourage them, if you have a station here for the baby, make sure you have snacks there. And I really talk to the dads about that because they want to know how can they support. And so I encourage them to set up a station wherever you think your wife is going to be to change the baby and breastfeed. Set a station up. And if you can pre-prep some foods, that will be amazing. However, if you have friends and family that is gonna come and visit, don't let them come empty-handed. Meaning, I encourage my family to do a meal plan. It's something that my group of friends that I call my village started years ago with an unfortunate situation, but it turned into such a beautiful blessing. And so whether it's birth or funeral, a death or something, we do a meal plan, and it could be 2 weeks or 2 months. And I asked them different restaurants you want. I said, if you or your husband cannot do it, I happily do it for you. I will set up a meal plan. You give me the list, and it sends a reminder to who's doing this day at this time. And it sends a reminder to the person and to you. So that takes away the stress of what we're going to eat for dinner. The other part is, if your family's coming to your house and you're worrying about cleaning up the house, that should not be a factor. That person who's coming in, if they have something to say about your house, they need to not come, or they need to put their hands to work. Whether it's laundry, because laundry still needs to be done, cleaning still needs to be done, shopping needs to be done. So no one should come empty-handed, because no, you don't need anyone to hold your baby. That's just plain as day. You should be spending all the time with your baby. So if they want to come and hold your baby, let them do some work before they hold your baby. And that's it. And I also encourage them to wait 2 weeks to a month before people start coming in because people don't have boundaries. They don't know limits. And there's stress. And then you don't know how to tell people, get out. You don't want to be mean, but sometimes you have to be mean. Get out.
Yeah, some people are very good at following cues. Others sometimes feel very comfortable.
Yes.
Latoya,
Yes.
we're getting close to the end of the episode. I wanted to ask you a little bit some not personal questions, but questions about you,
Okay.
and
Absolutely.
find out a little bit about. You have such a diverse background. You have a background in nursing. I'm not exactly sure what your role in banking was, but I'm just wondering how. First of all, how you were driven to this new role that you seem to be thriving in, and how do you pull from these past experiences to be a better doula for the people you care for?
So, as you said, very diverse background and quite a bit traumatic background. And so it motivated me. I wanted to be a nurse since a little girl. My thing was married, mother, and nurse with an undergrad for law. And so I did 2 years at the hospital, and I loved it. I did pediatrics, and I loved it. But I was leaving. I couldn't leave until all the babies that I took care of was sleeping. And I had a routine, which is like I come in and I greet them and I hug them and I love on them and I read the books with them and I pray with them and I sing to them. I put them to bed. But I didn't like how they were being treated because they knew I was coming. Since the nurses knew I was coming, they were being neglected because I stay way past my time. And then I one day worked in the NICU part of it. And that was depressing for me because I had these babies that, unfortunately, my babies didn't have, I think I saw 1 or 2 parents with all the babies I took care of. And I'm like, these are such loving babies. And I was in the operating room one day with the doctor, and I needed to help him with the baby, hold the baby so he could insert the needle. And the baby's looking me in the eyes and she's screaming. And I just threw my hands up and I was like, I can't do this. And he was like, what do you want to be again? I was like, I guess this is not it for me. And so my first birth was at the age of 19, which was my niece. And it was the most beautiful experience I've ever had. And then I had my second niece, my sister, and she was younger. But with her birth, I brought games in, and we played games the whole time she labored. We played boggle and cards and all sorts of stuff, and she labored and she had my niece, and she was just like, oh my God. And then I just started dealing with the women in my family. I helped them with lactation even before having any of these things. But it's something I love to do because it was a passion I had. And so when I had my fourth child, which is my daughter, because my birthing experience wasn't the greatest either. And I just started after my first son, I had a midwife, and I have to tell you, because of her, I wanted to be a midwife. I still do, but I love what I'm doing. It's not work for me. It's something I really enjoy. I love being able to love on the moms in the family and encourage them and then see life being born. And so with my daughter, after I had my daughter, my doctor said, wait, this is your fourth child. You're the last one in, the first one out. You need to go out and teach these women how to give birth. And it was just like, so I'm not crazy. I should go do this. And so I decided to go. I went to training with my daughter as a newborn, and I loved it. And I just went from there.
I love
Thank
that.
you for sharing that.
Love that. What I'm feeling as I hear you speak is a and I'm a mom, that I think modern motherhood, parenthood, I don't want to disregard the dads either. I think
Thank you.
they don't get all the
They,
airtime that
they
they
don't
need
get
either.
enough credit.
They don't get
Yes.
enough airtime that they need. But can actually be quite isolating and quite
Yes.
lonely. And that's what I
Yes.
really feel from parent groups about the way our society has shifted from when motherhood was really a communal
A
event, and
village.
the entire
Absolutely.
community
Yes.
came
Yes.
around. We see this still in the animal kingdom because they don't have
Yes.
the internet, right? So everybody is coming around to support that mommy and
Yeah.
baby through their transition for as long as it takes. And our
Yes.
society has really become separated from that idea.
Yes.
And I think birthing people say, like, I had this thing happen to me, and maybe it was, even if it was not quote unquote traumatic, it was a little traumatic, right? Even if you had a, a, a great birthing experience, it's a changing of your role. It's a changing of your lifestyle. It's this new dependence of this tiny person on you. And what I hear you saying is that, like, this is an opportunity for us to bring community back into the labor process. And I feel like even our parents in the NICU are even more isolated than the typical parent. And so this really resonated with me about how this can change the birthing process for people.
Yeah. So to piggyback off of that, Ben had asked regarding Baby Cafe.
Mm.
So that's what Baby Cafe is. A few of us doulas got together, and we spoke about what it is. I said, society have us removed from the statement, "It takes a village," and now we're just like, I do this on my own, but you're stressed, and your child then is left to pretty much raise on their own. When before, your neighbor look out for your child, the person down the street look out for their child. Like, you didn't have to worry, and now all the worrying is on you. So Baby Cafe, we meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 12 to 1:30, and we just have a safe space for women to ask their questions, to talk, to just interact with other moms. And then we created a WhatsApp group for them. And we have two, which is the Baby Cafe, which is all hours of the day, and then After Dark. Because the After Dark is for, women who has those questions that not sure how to ask during the day or don't know how someone will feel about it. It's more the intimate questions about sex. How do you go back into engaging in sexual activities? I don't feel this way about myself. So it's just encourage them to love you, because I'm like, listen, you gave life. You gave life. And it starts with self-love, which many of us lack. So when you start to love yourself, then you can love other people unconditionally, the way people are supposed to be loved. And then you can respect people from that standpoint as well, you know? And then so Baby Cafe turned out to be such a beautiful thing. It's about 100 moms on there now. And it's just a beautiful community that is built.
I love that. Thank you. My last question for today for you is for our neonatal professionals. So we're there to take care of babies, but we are often in the room at times of crisis. How can we better engage with doulas? How can we enhance that partnership from our side?
I feel like in the medical field, doulas and medical professionals can work so well if they allow us to be a part. Like, allow us to help. When I go there, I ask the nurse, can I help? If they're changing the sheets, if my client needs to use the bathroom, I can help. Help. I feel um a lot of medical professionals feels like we come to take over, and that's not it. It works so much better when everybody work together. And when everyone work together, the mom is not stressed. She feels welcome. It just turned into such a beautiful place. So I feel as though if everyone welcome each other, engage with each other. And if you need help, let us know how we can help you. It'll be such a beautiful thing.
Latoya Southwell, thank you so much for taking the time to answer our questions and come on the Incubator Podcast. It was a pleasure to learn more about the role that doulas serve for our community and to learn more about the way you do what you do. Thank you again for a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Daphna.
I'll see you next time.
Take care.